You won't believe why she betrayed her friend and sold her for organ harvesting. Esther was running through the rain, clutching her worn-out school bag to her chest, desperately trying to shield her books from getting soaked. She had just finished running an errand for her aunt, who never missed a chance to make her life miserable. As she hurried through the marketplace, she tripped on a loose stone and fell face first into a puddle of muddy water. Tears of frustration welled up in her eyes, but before she could get up, a delicate hand reached out to her. Looking up, she saw Mary, a girl with warm brown eyes and an inviting smile. Without hesitation, Mary helped Esther to her feet and handed her a clean handkerchief to wipe her face. "Are you okay?" she asked with genuine concern. Embarrassed but grateful, Esther nodded. She was used to being ignored or scolded for being clumsy, but Mary's kindness was different. They ended up walking home together that day, chatting as if they had known each other forever. By the time they reached Esther's neighborhood, a bond had already formed between them. From that day on, they were inseparable. They did everything together, studied, laughed, shared secrets, and even had sleepovers at Mary's house, where Esther found a warmth and love she never received from her aunt. Mary had a stable life with loving parents who supported her, but Esther had a tougher experience. Both of her parents had passed away, leaving her in the care of her aunt, who treated her poorly. Mary's home became a place of comfort for Esther, a refuge from the harsh treatment she faced daily. Despite these challenges, their friendship remained strong, and they leaned on each other through the ups and downs of life. As the years passed, Esther and Mary were both accepted into the same university. They were overjoyed. College life promised freedom, new adventures, and the chance to build their futures. They decided to live together off campus in a small but cozy apartment. Even though they had different courses, Mary studying business and Esther pursuing law, they were both filled with excitement as they moved into their off-campus apartment. Life at university felt like a fresh start. They quickly settled into their routine, Mary excelling in her business courses and Esther struggling to keep up in law. They spent most evenings in their cozy apartment, studying late into the night or talking about their dreams for the future. But for Esther, university life wasn't just about academics. It was about survival. From the very first semester, Esther struggled. Unlike Mary, who had a strong financial backing, Esther barely had enough to pay for her school fees, let alone buy textbooks and live comfortably. She took up menial jobs, working long nights just to afford her next meal. While Mary spent her evenings studying in their shared apartment, Esther would be at a local restaurant washing dishes, exhausted from the weight of her responsibilities. Then came the lecturer, Professor Odwale. He was infamous for preying on vulnerable female students, and unfortunately, Esther became his next target. It started with subtle remarks about her looks during lectures, then escalated to private meetings where he hinted that she could make things easier for herself if she was willing to cooperate. Esther refused, determined to maintain her dignity. But this decision came at a price. Suddenly, her grades in his course began to plummet, no matter how hard she studied. She reported him to the school authorities, but they dismissed her claims, calling her an attention seeker. Feeling helpless, she confided in Mary, who encouraged her to stay strong, but the damage had already been done. As if that wasn't enough, Esther found herself in the crosshairs of a dangerous cult on campus. One evening, on her way back from work, she accidentally bumped into a group of notorious cult members. Their leader, a man known as Shadow, took an interest in her. He made his intentions clear. He wanted her, and she had no choice but to accept. But Esther refused. She avoided him at all costs, even changing her usual routes on campus. But Shadow was relentless. One night, after a long shift at work, Esther walked home alone. Just as she turned onto a quiet street, a car screeched to a stop beside her. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her, shoving her into the back seat. Panic seized her as she realized she had been kidnapped. The car sped off, and fear gripped her heart. They took her to an abandoned building where Shadow sat, watching her with a sinister smile. He gave her an ultimatum: be his girl or suffer the consequences. Esther, terrified yet defiant, refused. Enraged, Shadow ordered his men to teach her a lesson. They slapped her, kicked her, and left her bruised and bleeding on the floor. But before they could do more, a loud noise interrupted them. Mary had alerted the authorities because it was rare for Esther not to come home on time, and she was also aware of Esther's constant harassment by Shadow. In a rare stroke of luck, the police raided the hideout just in time. Shadow and his men were arrested, but the damage had already been done. Esther was physically battered and emotionally shattered. She spent weeks recovering, barely able to focus on her studies. Despite everything, she refused to give up. With Mary's help, she managed to scrape through her courses. But the trauma never left her. Every time she walked past the faculty building, she remembered Professor Odwell's gaze. Every time she saw a black car, her heart pounded, fearing it was Shadow's men coming back for revenge. In the end, Mary graduated with a first-class degree, while Esther barely scraped through. She had fought too many battles to focus on school, and her results reflected that. Even so, Mary never made her feel lesser, always reassuring her that she was capable and strong. After university, Mary quickly secured a good job as a banker. She had multiple job offers lined up even before graduation. Her parents' connections and her impressive academic record ensured she was recruited immediately. Within weeks of finishing school, she had an apartment, a car, and financial stability. Esther, however, faced an entirely different reality. Job hunting was a nightmare. She sent out countless applications, attended numerous interviews, but was either rejected outright or ignored. Unlike Mary, she had no powerful connections to back her up. Her average grades didn't help either. Desperate to survive, Esther took on multiple menial jobs. She worked as a waitress in the mornings, a salesgirl in the afternoons, and sometimes took cleaning jobs at night. The exhaustion was unbearable. She envied Mary, who seemed to have it all. Why was life so unfair to her, she wondered. Mary met Jude at a work seminar. He was charming, intelligent, and kind. Their connection was instant. He respected her ambition and treated her like a queen. From surprise dates to heartfelt love letters, Jude constantly reminded Mary of how special she was. He showered her with thoughtful gifts, never missing an opportunity to express his love. Unlike other men she had dated, he never pressured her and always respected her choices. Their love blossomed, filled with laughter and genuine care. Esther admired their relationship and wished for a love like theirs, but she had been very unlucky in her relationships, so she decided to stop looking for love and focus on herself and growth. Just when she was about to lose hope, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as she sat at the local coffee shop filling out yet another job application, a man approached her. He was tall, with dark hair, and a charming smile that instantly put her at ease. His name was Nathan. He introduced himself as a businessman. His presence was magnetic, and he made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Nathan asked, his voice smooth and inviting. Esther hesitated for a moment. She had never been the type of person to jump into relationships so quickly, especially not with someone she had just met. But something in Nathan's eyes made her feel like she could trust him. Maybe he was the break she had been waiting for. Maybe he could help her find a way out of the rut she was stuck in. As their relationship began to blossom, Esther found herself feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Nathan was kind, attentive, and showered her with affection. He would take her out to fancy dinners, buy her flowers, and make her feel like she was the most important person in the world. But as their relationship deepened, Esther began to notice small things that made her uneasy. Nathan's generosity came with strings attached. He would often mention how he could provide for her, how she wouldn't have to work if she didn't want to. At first, it seemed like a sweet offer, but over time, Esther began to feel suffocated by his constant need to take control of every aspect of her life. One evening, as they sat in his luxurious apartment, Nathan casually mentioned something that made Esther's blood run cold. "You know, you don't have to worry about your friend Mary," he said, his voice laced with a strange calmness. "She's just a reminder of your old life, the life you're trying to escape. You're better off without her." Esther froze, her heart skipping a beat. She had always known that her relationship with Mary was special, but now she couldn't help but feel a strange tension building between them. Nathan's words, though softly spoken, felt like poison creeping into her mind. It was as if he wanted to separate her from the only person who had ever truly cared for her. But Esther dismissed the thought. She loved Nathan, didn't she? He had made her feel like someone important, someone worth loving. She tried to push aside the unease growing in her chest, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Nathan had a way of speaking that made Esther question everything she knew about herself, her friendships, and the people she trusted. Every conversation with him was laced with subtle suggestions, carefully placed doubts, and words that began to twist Esther's perception of reality. At first, it was just little things, comments about Mary's success, the way she always seemed to have everything so easy. Nathan made it seem like Mary's life was a constant reminder of Esther's shortcomings, that Mary was always the one who had it all together while Esther struggled. "You deserve better than that," Nathan would say with a soft, almost pitying smile. "You've worked so hard, Esther. You've been through so much, and yet it's always Mary who gets the attention, the praise. She's always the one people admire. Don't you think it's time for a change?" Esther would try to brush it off at first, not wanting to believe the words that had been planted in her mind. But over time, Nathan's influence grew stronger. He would remind her of all the ways Mary had seemed to have it easy, her supportive parents, her perfect grades, her bright future ahead of her. Nathan painted Mary as someone who had always been ahead of Esther, someone who had never struggled the way Esther had. And slowly, painfully, Esther began to believe him. She thought back to every time Mary had helped her, every moment when Mary had been there for her, and twisted those memories into something darker. Maybe Mary wasn't just helping her. Maybe she was keeping her down, holding her back from the success she deserved. One night, as they sat in Nathan's luxurious apartment, his voice smooth and convincing, he dropped the bombshell. "I have connections, Esther. People who can give you the life you deserve. There's a way you can finally be free of all the suffering you've gone through. It's a solution, one that would make you so much money, you'll never have to struggle again." Esther frowned, unsure of where the conversation was heading. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "I have a network of people who would be more than willing to take care of things. People who can buy what they need to get rich, people who deal in organs. They pay a lot of money, Esther, and all you'd have to do is, well, help me with one small thing. We get rid of Mary, and everything changes. You'd finally be free." Esther recoiled, her stomach turning at the thought. "What are you talking about? You want me to hurt Mary?" Nathan's smile remained unchanged, but his eyes were cold. No, not hurt her. Help her. It's the only way you can truly have everything you deserve. Mary is better off than you, and she's always had the best of everything. But if you do this, if you help me, you could live like her." Esther's heart raced, her mind spinning. Could she really do it? Could she betray the one person who had been there for her through it all? But the promise of freedom, the promise of a life where she wasn't constantly compared to Mary, it was too tempting. The days that followed felt like a blur. Esther's mind was consumed with the plan Nathan had planted in her head. He had a way of making everything seem so easy, so simple. He reassured her constantly, telling her that it was the only way to get ahead in life. "Mary won't even know what hit her," Nathan would say with a casual shrug, as if this was just another business deal. "You'll be set for life, Esther. All you have to do is invite her to the party. Get her to trust you like she always has." Esther tried to convince herself that she was doing the right thing. She tried to tell herself that Mary wouldn't understand what it meant to be stuck, to be constantly struggling to make ends meet. Esther wanted the same things Mary had: success, love, a future that didn't feel like an uphill battle. And Nathan had promised her that it could all be hers, if only she followed through. The plan was simple. Esther would invite Mary to a house party at Nathan's place. It would be casual, just some drinks, music, and maybe a game or two. Nothing unusual. The kind of night they had shared together many times before. But this time, things would be different. Nathan had a way of getting people to do what he wanted, and once she was drugged, he and his people would take what they needed. It was the perfect crime. Mary wouldn't suspect a thing. Nathan had already promised her the life of luxury, the kind of life that would finally make her feel like she was worth something. Esther would be the one to make it all happen. But as the date of the party drew closer, Esther began to feel the weight of what she was about to do. But Nathan kept pushing, kept reassuring her. "Once this is over, you won't need to worry about anything anymore," he would say. "No more struggling. No more comparing yourself to Mary. You'll finally have everything you've ever wanted." And with that, Esther began to believe him. She told herself that it was the only way out, the only way to escape the constant comparison, the feelings of inadequacy. She reached out to Mary, slowly and carefully, inviting her to Nathan's house. At first, Mary was hesitant. "I don't know, Esther," she said, her voice laced with uncertainty. "I'm not sure if I want to go. It sounds a little strange." But Esther kept pushing, kept reassuring her. "It'll be fun, Mary. Just us hanging out like old times. Please. For me." After a long pause, Mary finally agreed, her voice quiet but kind. "Okay, I'll come, but only because you asked." Esther's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the point of no return. She had convinced Mary to come, and soon, the plan would be set into motion. As the day of the party approached, Esther could barely sleep. The guilt gnawed at her, but each time she thought about it, Nathan's words played in her mind. "You'll finally have everything you've ever wanted, Esther." The night of the party arrived, and the air was thick. Mary could feel the tension as soon as she stepped into Nathan's extravagant home. The atmosphere was unfamiliar, cold, and far too polished, too perfect. The walls were adorned with expensive art, and the soft music playing in the background only made her feel more out of place. She had known Esther for so long, and she could tell that something about this night was off. Esther seemed nervous too, though she kept trying to reassure Mary that everything would be fine. As the night went on, they mingled with a few other guests, played games, danced, and drank. At first, the laughter felt genuine, a familiar escape from the daily struggles that both women had faced. But Mary's discomfort never fully left her. She could feel her unease growing with every passing hour. She tried to tell herself that it was just the unfamiliar environment, but deep down, she felt like something was terribly wrong. The way Nathan kept looking at them, always a little too intensely, a little too controlling, sent a shiver down her spine. The tension hit a breaking point when Nathan approached them with 2 glasses of brightly colored drinks. He smiled at Esther, his eyes glinting with something darker than the warmth his words tried to convey. "Here you go, ladies. A drink for the perfect night. You deserve it." Esther took the glass from him with a smile, but Mary hesitated. Her instincts were screaming at her to refuse, but she couldn't explain why. With a quick glance at Esther, she saw her friend taking a sip, and Mary didn't want to appear rude or ungrateful. They clinked glasses, but as Mary swallowed the drink, she immediately felt dizzy. The room began to spin, and a sense of heaviness pressed against her chest. It wasn't the alcohol. It was something else. Panic slowly crept in as the dizziness became overwhelming. "Esther," Mary muttered, her voice slurring slightly. "Something's wrong." Esther's face went pale as she looked down at her drink, the realization dawning upon her like a cold wave. "Oh, no, 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 no," she whispered frantically, her mind racing. Nathan had drugged them both. Mary's eyes widened with shock. What? What did you say?" "Mary, I'm so sorry," Esther whispered, feeling a surge of guilt and horror crash over her. "It's all a lie. I'm so sorry. Nathan, he's been manipulating me. This was never about us having fun. We were in danger." Her words faltered as she tried to stand, but her legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed back onto the couch. Mary, despite the effects of the drug, tried to steady herself. "We have to leave. Now. We have to get out of here." But the room around them was spinning, and the doors were locked. The last thing Esther saw before she blacked out was Nathan, standing in the doorway with a cruel smile on his face, his plan unfolding before her eyes. When Esther regained consciousness, her wrists were tied, her body cold, and her mind fuzzy. The once grand house that had felt so lively and welcoming now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows. Her chest tightened with fear as she realized they were no longer in the party room. Mary lay beside her, unconscious, her face pale and drawn. Esther struggled against the ropes, but it was no use. Nathan had them both exactly where he wanted them. Panic set in, and she tried to scream for help, but her voice was weak, strangled by the drugs still coursing through her system. Esther's heart dropped. You can't do this," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. But Nathan wasn't listening. His men moved in, preparing for the unthinkable, and Esther could do nothing but watch in helpless terror. Her whole life had led to this moment. The moment she had finally allowed herself to believe Nathan's lies. The moment she betrayed the one person who had truly loved her. Nathan's men began to harvest both their organs. The next few days felt like a blur. Mary's parents, frantic with worry, reported her disappearance to the police, but the case didn't seem to gain any traction. At first, the police dismissed it as just another case of young people going off for a while without telling anyone. They didn't take it seriously, not until it was far too late. Jude, Mary's boyfriend, couldn't stop searching. He combed through every corner of the city, questioned anyone who might have seen or heard something. But as the days turned into weeks, the search turned hopeless. It felt like Mary had vanished without a trace. Then, one day, as Jude followed a lead in a forgotten part of the city, he found something that made his blood run cold. A series of articles about Nathan's shady dealings, whispers about a network that dealt in human trafficking and organ harvesting. He couldn't believe it at first, but the pieces began to fall into place. The connections he made between Nathan and the people Esther had been associating with grew clearer. Jude started his own investigation. Every detail, every clue pointed to the same horrifying conclusion. Nathan had orchestrated Mary's disappearance. And Esther, the girl he had once considered a friend, was a pawn in this twisted game. Determined to find the truth, Jude worked tirelessly, collecting evidence, until he had enough to go to the authorities. With everything in place, the police finally took action, and Nathan was arrested. In a cold, empty courtroom, Nathan sat with a smirk as the evidence against him piled up. But when the truth was laid bare, when his confession came, slow and dripping with malice, the weight of his crimes could no longer be denied. He had murdered 2 innocent women, harvested their organs for profit, and destroyed the lives of those who loved them. Nathan was sentenced to life in prison, but it didn't bring back Mary or Esther. Their families, their friends, were left to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives, their hearts broken by a betrayal so deep it was impossible to imagine. Mary's parents, devastated, mourned the loss of their daughter. They had raised her with so much love, only to have her ripped away by a man's greed. They couldn't understand why she had to be taken from them, why her life had to end in such a cruel, senseless way. And Esther had been lost long before the end came. Her desperation to escape her life had blinded her to the truth. And in the end, she paid the ultimate price.